Hi, this is Privateer Station, and while Olexiy and Mark are taking a break today, we are finishing the last one of those streams that we did not translate in time during the holidays. So today we have day 302, the one that originally aired on December 22nd, 2022. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. It is Thursday, December 22nd. Time is 4 minutes past 10, 4 minutes past 11 in Moscow. And we're doing another stream, day 302, with Olexiy Arestovych. Olexiy, glad to see you. Good evening. How is your health, Mark? Well, I got a flu. Doctor told me it is a flu. Oh, that's all right. I've suffered worse, so dealing with it. We have 115,000 watching us live. Over 22,000 of you clicked the like button. Thank you for not ignoring us in these pre-Christmas days and continue sharing and clicking the like button and sending your friends to subscribe and to watch these streams, those who need to do that. Subscribe to Feigin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, and of course, if you are watching or listening that in English, subscribe to Privateer Station and click that bell button to get the notifications of our new releases. Alright, let's start. Briefly about the map. There were a lot of comments that we are ignoring some details and jump to political topics. Let's quickly touch on the map. Mark, let me address ignoring the details first. The thing is, when a person who represents the office to some degree is commenting on things, the information tends to become an official statement. So when I was an independent observer, an independent commentator, when I touched upon Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict, I could comment on every meter, every yard of the territory, who stands where, does what. However, when we are talking about the situation here in Ukraine, 5 different channels at least cut 7 ways to Sunday different clips from our stream, and it immediately becomes a set of their news channels. So very often they do that, and that's why I'm using the formula of evil tongues and addressing it from the standpoint of what is being discussed in Russia and the other online sources, because the moment we stream, the moment we talk about something, it tends to be brought to people as official report. And in the situation that we have when the active war fighting is happening, commanders of different regions, sometimes of the front, have no capability to report timely. For example, on the same thing on the Russian side. So sometimes on the Russian side, they have no time to report to their military machine. Their machine works worse than ours, and then they don't even know that our troops are succeeding in taking some locations. And then Feygin and Arestovych come out and say, hey, we are already successful over there. And then Russian troops get their reinforcement because their command all of a sudden figured out that they haven't heard something from a certain village for a few days. And then some troops from the Ukrainian side might go where they did not expect to have Russians and might have died there. So our main principle here is do no harm. So very often we need to be super careful when addressing these unfolding trends. And some of the military commentators, I almost want to go visit them and shoot them after some of the reviews that they're doing. Because I know people who actually died because of the reports that surfaced too early, while the operation was still underway. I don't mind discussing and commenting things, if we talk about Idlib province, where pro-Turkish are fighting with pro-Russian forces, and we can discuss the street names, houses, and all that. In Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, I discussed everything with elevations and groups and all. But even then, I tried to not do much harm. And here, my friends, my comrades are dying on the front. So if somebody wants to go dive into details, daily details, and things that happen, I'm not going to share these details. And Olexiy, we never really went that way. We never really set people up like this with news of operations that are still undergoing. Right, Mark. But we are addressing general strategic situation. There are only small tactical group of tactical motions that need to be brought to the public media sphere. The rest should be a fog of war while it's happening. And I'd rather address with you the strategic situation with the support of our allies from Europe, from the United States, the situation what Russia can counter that with. And in a way also help people to understand how to think strategically, how to think globally when you analyze situations like that. And don't be surprised that some people actually did know back in 2018, 2019 that the war is imminent, that we will be attacked. So I'm trying to, as well, you don't need special training, special conditioning when you're being trained, and that takes years. I'm showing you that there is a shortcut. You can actually start viewing things from that angle, even right now. But those clowns that on different streams tell you who is taking which house in which village, how many troops are standing here, how many of them are fighting there, what was hit on that street, and how many tanks are hiding behind the hill. This is my country. These are other. I'm not going to do harm. There are too many people who already diving into that and actually are causing harm to our troops. So our concept doesn't intend to have a very detailed story of things unfolding at the moment on the ground in this show, because people will likely pay with their blood for the news being revealed too early. Because very often people who bring this news, who bring that to the audience, they don't think about the consequences. And I have to. Because some people need to express their emotions and cheer up and stuff. I need to win war. I need to shove my emotions deeper and eagerness to discuss our successes and address it from the professional standpoint of do no harm and what are the big strategic situations. And some people can't. They would rather bring up a situation about the village and which direction the tanks will come through and cause harm. So we need to be very careful. In Kherson, the enemy is trying to shoot the city, and for some reason they are thinking that our troops are located in living quarters of the city, and we're trying to counter that and shoot them as they approach the radius that we can reach. On Zaporozhye, there is a line. You can see that on the white line, Melitopol-Tokmak, and they're lining up their troops along that line, and they're trying to increase their numbers and to prepare some kind of defense. Can we understand how many people are in the Russian group down in the south? The whole south is probably about 50,000. It sounds menacing, but it's very few for such a distance. That reminds me of those 200,000 that are supposed to arrive here and do a horrible terror on our front line. And it sounds like 200,000 is horrible, especially when you compare 330 that were part of that comprised the initial attack on Ukraine. But I need to remind that near Bakhmut in the last couple of months, they wasted about 60,000 troops. That's about a third of these 200, so it's not too much. Bad as it is, it's not too scary. And in Crimea, they keep fortifying their defense lines. In Ugledar, there's a very heavy fighting going on. There is no movement of the front. It is holding, but the fighting is fierce. So there are no major advancements there. Nobody captured more Pavlovka, approached Tugledar, but the fighting is very intense. Now, Novomikhailivka, an eternal attempt to keep running towards Marinka, and it slowed down. Enemies initially succeeded in getting to the center of Marinka and even turned that into the moonscape. But right now something happened. I'm not going to tell what, but their advance stopped. Nevelskaya, Vodinoya, all that motion towards capturing or surrounding Avdiivka from the direction of southeast. It is a complex front line, which is a difficult obstacle for Russian troops because our defenses were being built there for 8 years. And Kamenka is, see those two red arrows in the upper part of that map? This is an attempt to close that encirclement, but that's an, again, old story. They keep trying to push. And they're not succeeding. And evil tongues, for example, guys like Colonel Girkin on the Russian side are saying that our troops kicked Russians from Bakhmut, and as he said, threw these troops from Bakhmut to the outskirts and to the dump sites. And I'm not commenting the details, but Russian forums are discussing that there were some counteroffensive actions here. And you can see on the map that that red plague was removed further from Bakhmut. You can see the gray area pushed to the right. On the south, they're still trying to go in with offensive, but in Bakhmut, they're still failing. The hot area between Bakhmut and Solidar is pretty hot. These are in the center of the map. Sporna and Belogorovka, that's further up north. These two arrows, they keep trying and they keep failing there. And there are some events happening between Nizhnya Dvanka to Kremenaya. Some evil tongues are discussing that there are some Ukrainian troops moving towards Kremenaya, or others are saying that are moving to the south, near Svatova. But we cannot confirm that until it is blatantly obvious and confirmed by our general command. Now, regarding the shellings and shootings, we, of course, have traditional hits on Kherson, Nikolaev, Kharkov, Dnepr, Zaporozhye, and Kryvyi Rog. That's on the northern side. And we are expecting missile strike probably starting tomorrow or somewhere in the next 2 days. That already was announced, and once again, our media, I'm joining them to tell people to not ignore the air raid sirens. And I can discuss on some of the happy news happening in Russian Federation. Legion Freedom of Russia is commenting about a successful operation, actually several of those, on the Trans-Siberian Railroad from the east to the west in Russia, and they destroyed a bunch of control centers alongside the road. Over 30 blocks were damaged or destroyed during the last week, and that caused a significant slowdown of trains transporting cargo from the eastern side of Russia to the front and to the west in general. I understand that mobilized in Russia don't really want to go to fight, and they started breaking apart their railroads, and that tendency is growing. That's a trend that Putin and Shoigu will not comment about. 5 delayed or partially derailed trains and 30 destroyed controllers along the railroad lines, that's a significant story that is being ignored on the Russian side. About 300,000 are watching us, 80,000 click the like button. From the railroad war, let's go to another event. that entertained social media in the last 24 hours. I would call it the butt blow up. So tell me, are you mean Rogozin? Yeah. Some people are saying that was a shot from Caesar. Mark, is it that important? What was used to shoot them? Well, no, it means that even Caesar can reach them that far, that deep. Oh, or Rogozin is curious if he's worthy of a HIMARS attack. I don't know. I don't know, Olexiy, but his butt is very working part of his body, and now I think he is very upset.
Медицинский диагноз звучал так, что ранение мягких тканей сквозное огнестрельное осколочное тканей ягодичных тканей, значит, она и этот же диагноз открытая.
The diagnosis, yeah, the last diagnosis was that turned into a meme with a through and through wounding of the soft tissue of the lower parts of the back, and also coinciding with a through and through wound of the brain tissue. Yeah, right. That was a funny one. So apparently, what we know, Olexiy, that some Donetsk fake republic collaborants and people were celebrating holiday, and Rogozin visited that and partook in it. So somebody, Mark, apparently leaked that information, and the system of ethics in that part of the world implies that things like that do happen. There are a lot of people upset with each other. There's a lot of infighting happening there. There are a lot of people who want to become prime minister of that fake republic, so they are targeting their current one. Plus, Rogozin was somewhere a contender for the post of the head of that region, and now I guess after that attack, he cannot fully contend that position. Right, Mark. It is a very dangerous position to even aspire to occupy. So probably he will rethink his position now. You know, when they were next to Kiev, they were also sharing data. They were also sending us information about what's happening where. Do you think it's their side who's feeding the intel? I'm not entirely familiar with this specific one, but I suspect that, yes, that's exactly what happened. I actually am getting a text correction here from friends that he's got a shrapnel in the lower part of a spine, and this is a serious story that actually, if it is too close to certain nerves there, that may cause incontinence. Ooh, so you mean he'll be walking with a little can or pouch for the rest of his life? It's a possibility, we don't know, but yeah. By the way, do you know that Peskov reacted to that event and already made a public statement that none of the Russian people will be afraid to visit newly acquired territories on the West, and they were coming and they will continue coming to these territories. Well, in this case, we can counter and say we've been shooting, we've been hitting, and we'll continue. Right, Olexiy, keep coming, exactly. Mark, I would say gather all together and celebrate some big holiday together. It'll make it much easier for all of you and for all of us. So, yeah, there was another meme today that Rogozin decided to cross the border of occupied territory, adding to the criminal prosecution. And the other side decided to send him, since they could not give him the writ of criminal prosecution, they decided to attach that to one of the shells and just shot it over at the party. So, all right. So, let's talk about Zelensky's trip. He apparently is back in Poland. I don't know if he's moving to Kiev. Right, Mark, I do not know if he's moving to Kiev, but he was in Poland. I think if he wanted to go to Germany or Britain, he probably would have gone there directly. Correct, Mark. It was either false information or he changed his mind.
информация или передумал.
Maybe circumstances affected his trip route.
Обстоятельства мешают
In
поменяться.
war times, everything changes unpredictably and really rapidly sometimes.
Быстро и непредсказуемо.
In any case, he is coming back, seems to.
Разрешите
Во всяком
процитировать
случае, он возвращает.
Владимира Ильича Ленина.
Let me quote one figure whom we know as Vladimir Lenin, that if political situation is changing 20 times a day, then politics need to change 20 times a day.
Пресс-брифинг не
Okay, Alexei. Have you watched the briefing of that well-known figure named Putin today and the statements that he made? How did you watch that? How do you find it? I found it very peculiar. I'm watching certain elements of that stream. I'm looking if his tone is changing, if his fingers are clasping, and if his foot is twitching. So, in my impression, he was doing his usual round of lies, and he was very nervous while doing that. All right. So here's an example part of that.
Например, указ
The decree about countermeasures to the oil prices ceiling, I'll sign in a couple days.
все, что могу.
Then he also said that they will not be wasting money left and right in the current situation.
Видимо, войны
He says that he meets Russian military daily.
встречаясь с военными.
And the juiciest part, I guess,
Значит, и самое сочное, самое, так сказать,
aiming right at Rogozин's nether regions,
самый сфинктер Рогозина, я бы сказал. Он заявил, что
he says that they will
американское вооружение Киева мы пощелкали
blow Patriots.
Patriarchs.
Значит, у Путина есть...
We'll just click them out
Каждый раз, когда он переходит на блатной жаргон,
Да.
или
whenever America supplies them.
вот это
Mark, there is an interesting feature I need to mention here. Putin, every time when he switches to some semi-gangster language, it means that that thing hurts real much, that topic that he is addressing. He's real nervous about that. In the meantime, yeah, we did hit Rogozin's butt, and of course, nobody will click out anything that we brought to the front,
будет как раз в ответ очень успешно.
and that works from a distance. So, yeah, I can state here that he did not feel comfortable and he was very nervous while making that statement.
Это не просто даже вооружение, это не
So, Patriot is more of a symbolic act, right? Not than the actual threat at the moment. Right. While we don't have them yet, it's already been discussed and agreed upon. So, remember, they've been fighting that war to push NATO too far, further away. So, their success is that now they have NATO 1,500 kilometers, 1,500 kilometers, about 1,200 miles closer to Russian border. And now there are Patriot systems going to be deployed in Ukraine.
еще его один тезис, он, например, заявил,
Okay, so another statement
да, он если не
that he made, he said that Ukrainian military-industrial complex is, if not destroyed, is fully in shambles, and our industry is growing, so we'll continue reinforcing our troops. What can you say about that, Alexei? Well, I'll bring up the recent decision that was made in America that they dedicated $44 billion to Ukraine for 2023, out of which half is roughly to support our military, our war effort.
Это 2 миллиарда в месяц.
That's about $2 billion a month. In such a situation, we can afford to not have any military-industrial complex. But in reality, we do have it. And they are building things. And when I started looking into these numbers, I was generally surprised. I thought we were doing much worse.
Познакомиться в общих чертах.
So I guess that's the case of when we could not achieve what we wanted to, we started to paint what we achieved as our initial goal
Выдавать желаемое
on the Russian side.
достигнуто за живое.
So I'm kind of curious, what will they be giving in terms of equipment and weapons to the next wave of their mobilized?
Ну вот, например, он дальше сказал, вот опять же, вот как хотите расценивать. Путина, возможно,
So another direct quote from Putin.
ситуацию, в Украине. Он,
I would
цитата, я бы
have
ответил
answered
и глубже. У меня в свое время была
deeper and wider. I had an actual friend in my younger years who used to say
глубоко.
duper. I was wondering why she was saying that. Apparently, she meant deeper, and that's what he referred to in his speech. I would not defer to the content of why did he refer to deeper. let's keep that X-rated commentary out, but he did elaborate that America was involved in working and preparing Ukraine for this war, that America was preparing Zelensky and Arestovych to capture power in Ukraine and then to threaten Russia. Oh yeah, so they hear groaning from everywhere, right? Exactly. Mark, let me be banal here a little bit. He said that the West and the United States always wanted to destroy Russia. I'm trying to remember, even recent times, Bush's chicken drums back in the 90s, the lifting of IT restrictions on Russia after Soviet Union, Jackson-Vanik Amendment. And then we can remember also going deeper, 1945 and 1940s actually, the whole Lend-Lease program that supported Russia back in the days. All the help that Soviet Union got during the industrialization earlier in the 20s and the 30s. And we can also go back to the times when America was providing humanitarian aid in times of hunger on the territory of Soviet Union. So, yeah. It's interesting, and it's real story versus his fantasies. I will parry that here, Olexiy. Why would the United States not want to get rid of Soviet Union? They partook in Cold War. In some parts, it reached a very precipice of turning into a hot war. There were two countries, Soviet Union and United States. Soviet Union lost that war and ceased to exist at the end of it. United States came out victorious, and they did not quite behave themselves as the winner. Because if Soviet Union would have won that war, you can only imagine what would happen to the United States. So, United States, which have not captured Moscow, which have not hung communists on the Red Square, thank you for that. Soviet Union ceased existing, and then United States started supplying and providing humanitarian aid with those, Bush drumsticks and stuff. And they were helping. They were actually helping when the country was falling apart. And now they're looking back in Russia and saying, why did you win in the Cold War? Well, because you've lost it. United States, I would say here that, Mark, United States in the face of George Bush, actually, remember they were calling for republics of ex-USSR to not leave the physical agglomeration of it, to not leave the political country. Yeah, that's history, right? And that same thing, when Russia is making statements, very often they're fake. So whenever Putin is talking about increasing of their military-industrial complex, the fact that they're giving them more buckets with bolts and nuts doesn't mean that they're going to produce anything worthy. Their main task of that complex now is to restore and repair the equipment they're bringing from conservation that was put away back in, 50, 60 years ago? Okay, another thing Putin mentioned, he talked about negotiations and some peace process, and let's address that and then conclude that aspect. So he was saying that we've been waiting, we've been hoping for some measures, some agreements, and now it turns out that we have been deceived. I think he's referring to Minsk agreements and all the preceding period. And he's basically saying that we've been trying to hold, to not do anything, but then we were forced to start this war. And by the way, he named this operation war for the first time himself. Oh, you mean he violated the penal code of Russian Federation? Olexiy, some people can, some people can't. No, Mark, listen. What I'm hinting at, when you'll be Attorney General, you can, General Prosecutor, you can actually pull that card as well. Play a real Jesuit here and put him in prison for calling special military operation a war. Just like he put hundreds of other people behind bars. Yeah, that's funny. But for him, it remains a game, Olexiy. He just plays that usual card that, we've been waiting and did not want to start the war, but who were forced to. So the thesis in Minsk relations is pushing back to Merkel's article where she mentioned that the time the God gave Ukraine some time to refit and to prepare for this war, and we discussed that article with a critical attitude, while Putin is bringing it up with the offended side attitude. But again, they bring up this thesis, and since you were there, you were part of that organization, at least at the end of it, right? When they were signing these agreements. Mark, not exactly at the end of it. I spent a year and a half out of 5 years of its work, so about a third. So, can you comment on that thesis that he's mentioning in his speech? Mark, you need to be schizophrenic in order to use it this way, and you need to be a schizophrenic Russian society to swallow it and not even blink. Because at the same time, there are existing two visions of Putin. One of them is a visionary who is seeing into the hundreds of the future years and figuring out the geopolitical strategic role of Russia in that environment. And then the second Putin, who was played by Merkel and by a budding Ukraine next door to him, and they tricked him. So these two images, how can they exist in the head of one person or one society in Russia? That's a conundrum. Especially, I don't know if, having to go use an outhouse in the 21st century, which a third of Russians still do, if it matters, if it changes, if it allows you to think about things this way. But in reality, he's the leader who is keeping them in this situation economically, who has not evolved Russia into anything flourishing. And in Russia, it appears that logic and consequences and analysis are equivalent to the weapons of mass destruction in Russia, because it appears nobody is using that, nobody is analyzing the statements that they're making. Because how can a country that is interfering into American elections, that is expunging France from Central Africa, that is putting Americans back in place all around the world, and vying for control of half the planet. And at the same time, he is also being tricked by smaller countries, and he's naively believes that this is what it should be, and then he has to start a war to remedy the problem. And killing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians is just a consequence of him being tricked. So I don't know how that coincides, that lives together in one head, but... All right. Tehran, Iran, is still making statements that they have never transferred UAVs to Russia, and they're even threatening Zelensky that he needs to cease commenting on that, because he equated Iran with terrorists. So, Mark, today we have a day of a diplomat in Ukraine. So my congratulations to our diplomats and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, however, I suspect are not celebrating anything today, because they probably gathered now at the table and trying to understand that Iran is running out of strategic patience. What does that statement mean? Is that what they said? Yeah, that's exactly what they said. They're running out of strategic patience. So if anybody understands what it means, please send it in my direct message, and I'll be glad to deliver that to our foreign affairs, because we're trying to figure what it is and how do we live now. So, okay, you think they may get upset and get ballistic missiles to Russia? Well, Mark, they are giving weapons already. Drones for sure, ballistic missiles maybe, we'll see. And they're also training that other model, Majir 6, which is like a helter-skelter copy of Bayraktar. They bought 15 of them and they're testing them in Crimea. A few months ago, at the beginning of that operation, we shot down one of them near Odessa. They are very similar, Iran and Russia, in many aspects. Very, indeed, and I hope they have the same destiny. Yeah, I wanted to say something, but I'd rather not. Right. I found it within myself to stay quiet. Exactly. You should not be more vulgar than Feygin, Olexiy. Sit tight. Okay. So, Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs also commenting that Greece will be giving Ukraine S-300 systems. And it's interesting. I want to tell you that position of Greece is very exciting for us because Moscow has invested a significant amount of money into Greece. All that new Afon and all the orthodoxy and all the church-related corrupted connections. Mark, I even know a specific subject of mass population of Greece by retired Russian bureaucrats and ex-military, and a lot of big villas with a lot of storage facilities and expensive cars and all that. But it's interesting to see the position of Greece, and this still exists, and their position exists on the background of all that happening. So, first of all, Moscow is trying to look for Turkey as a possible alliance or some support in this conflict. Of course, Greek doesn't like that, Greek side. And generally, Greece is, regardless of how Orthodox Christian and different from Catholic West it was, it's still a part of the Western world. Mark, if we talk about investments, we can even stay here on the level of investments. If you look at it deeper, European Union and NATO invested more and more of a higher quality projects in Greece. So they invested more. Yeah, right. There was a big crisis that was overcome due to money from Germany and European Bank, right? So you think that's maybe also a metaphysical conflict? It used to be an Orthodox Greece, right? Mark, Orthodoxy is very diverse. On the highest level, there are 5 different patriarchs: Constantinople, Alexandria, Antiochia, Russia, and there are other diversions. And we do remember how Moscow was treating the Constantinople top of Orthodox Church. Moscow even wanted to get to assassinate him at some point. There were leaks about that. Exactly. So with all that, with that treatment of other branches of Orthodox Church in the world, the fact that Russia gilded some of the monuments, of some of the historic monuments, or built another church on the territory, all right, they let you do that so they get more tourists. But it has nothing to do with strategic interests of Greece as a part of collective West and strategic interests of the Greek Church that were trampled upon by Russian Church times and times again. And also in the eyes of the Orthodoxy, Russian Church has discredited itself to a significant degree. And Greeks and the other parts of that group, they do see that decay that's happening in Russian Church, and they don't want to associate close with it. Well, this goes in an interesting direction. They may lose the last fort in this fight with Greek, because they might actually get expunged from the Orthodox group of churches. Oh yeah, Russian church is very interesting. They don't really want to dig this up, because if they go deeper in the history, they can pull the Kiev Patriarch, who actually moved church headquarters to Moscow, and essentially it is a branch of Kievan Orthodoxy and should have remained that. that discussion, oh, that's going way too far, Olexiy. No. That discussion happened before, and they do remember. They have long memory in church. So Moscow is better not be bringing the origins of their church, because they'll be in a much less envious position. I think, Olexiy, they'll be just, at the end of this story, they may be sent to, they may be given anathema. That'll be an answer to their "you all die and we go to heaven." That'll be some heaven for them in their worldview. I think the biggest fear, Mark, is that God may actually exist. All right, yeah, that's funny. Last thing for today, there is a story with Karabakh. Armenia brought all the grievances to Moscow, that even peacekeepers cannot preclude Azerbaijan from entering that territory, and Pashinyan appears to be on the verge of splitting ties with Moscow and their Organization for Joint Security. What do you think about that? It will not be a quick process, but it moves that way. Is it pushed and peddled by the West or some other allies? Because Pashinyan is having ties with France and with America, and they're pretty against Putin in the current political situation. Well, yeah, Pashinyan and Armenia have pretty close ties with France. The country doesn't have access to sea. It is surrounded by neighbors with whom they have very difficult relations. The main ally that Armenia wanted to get in the face of Russia dumped them several times and cheated on them several times with their enemies, Turkey and Azerbaijan. To use Armenian territory just as a transport hub for some products, cargo, and others. That corridor that is in question is not for nothing. This is a special transport way as well that can be used to bring goods from Turkey to Russia. And Azerbaijan and Turkey offered Armenia after the first war, after the first conflict. Azerbaijan suggested a project, Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, and it would not have gone initially. The project was designed to not go through Georgia, but they offered to send it this way, and Armenia refused. Armenia said no, they don't want to, and the events ensued. Right now, they're making another offer. They're basically saying that, hey, you can come back to the group of civilized people. We can all share in profits. Let's find an agreement how we structure. The only thing that precludes Armenia from participating in that deal is Armenian presence in that military organization with Russia. At the same time, that military organization where Russia presides also doesn't provide them with anything, doesn't provide them with any support or advances. And that reminds, if you switch it down to the ground level and speak in some plain terms, it reminds of a situation when the wife is tolerating, in order to keep the family, and her best friend is tolerating her husband having sex with her best friend. So that's where Armenia now. And sooner or later that situation will conclude. They're on the way to. All right, let's hope. The sooner the better. Because that joint defense organization with Russia did not resolve any problem for Armenia. They only made them worse. And that's what they have to analyze and make conclusions now. Last thing, we saw a post about the death of your friend on the front. It's all sad. The war takes a lot of good people. By the way, Afanasyev, who was a Crimean prisoner, also died. He died somewhere on Donbass as well. These things happen, unfortunately. There's nothing we can do about it. Last situation I wanted to touch upon was Mikhail Saakashvili. I think we discussed him earlier in some of the streams, but I think he's very desperate and physically in a frail condition. He is a citizen of Ukraine, and in the situation he is now, it's been about a year that he's been in prison in Georgia. He's been transferred to some sort of prison hospital now, but somehow Tbilisi still doesn't want to stop that charade and let their first president go, who is of a frail state. I wish they were that vehement about the Moscow agents in their government. Yeah, Mark, this is a sick man who is dying there in prison, and these people do not think, or do not allow themselves to think strategically, because if he dies in prison, everybody will say that Georgian government killed him, and they will not be able to wash it off. They'll become a very strong aspect of their future politics, and it'll be used later for mass disturbances, for protests, and maybe even revolution when that happens. And the West will not forget that, Olexiy, right? The West will find a way to punish them for it. So here is the question: whom are they afraid of? And the answer is Moscow, right? And I think they're going to be afraid of Moscow till about the same time as Armenia, when they're about done with Moscow now. And Georgia has a third of its territory occupied by Russia, has suffered tremendously from Russia, and now they're bending over like that for Russia. So that's upsetting. And here's a lesson for Russia. In Georgia, young people do not know Russian language at all. Yet their politics are still somewhat going the Russian-centric political course. So it's not a stable situation for Georgia. And Austrian and other chancellors in Europe, the ones who have nothing in relation with Russia, they still sell their consciousness and they sell themselves for money to support Putin's opinions. And I know that that world, even in Ukraine, there probably will be some people after the war who will be ready to jump ship and support Russia for Russian money. So, yeah, people give it a thought. Give it a thought why your politicians are so detached. Okay, thank you, Olexiy. Please, guys, continue subscribing, continue clicking the like button. Thank you for sticking with us. Tomorrow is Friday, right? Yeah, all's good. All's according to the plan. Alright, I hope I'll feel better tomorrow. Please do not worry about my health. I see a lot of well wishes in the chat. Don't worry, it's just a small hindrance. We will be making an interesting show tomorrow. You'll be sick and I'll be tired as a dog at the end of the week. I had a horrible week, so yeah, will be quite a show on tomorrow stream. Olexiy, I traveled this week. I gave actual live in-person interviews to different channels in Europe. You think you got it from them? I don't think they gave it to me, but communicating with a lot of people, it always has its downsides, right? So at least I did not catch that flu for nothing, so there'll be interesting streams. Alright, see you tomorrow. Bye.